everyone. We're here to tell you about the Venture Maidens podcast.
For lifelong gamers.
For longtime friends.
Doing a real play 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons podcast.
Including such themes as...
awkward NPC romance.
Darts to the butt.
Chopping things with axes.
Find us on iTunes, Spreaker, Twitter, Facebook, or Twitch.
New episodes every other Sunday.
Or every other Wednesday on Twitch.
Check out our website, www.theventuremaidens.com.
And start the quest today. Until then, venture away.
This is Tabletop Babble. I'm James Introcaso. This week on the show, we are reviewing the new Wizards of the Coast product, Tales from the Yawning Portal. This book is their newest hardcover adventure book that is actually a series of adventures. We'll get more into what it is when we get to the panel discussion. Joining me in reviewing the books are the one and only Sam Dillon from the Tome Show podcast and RPGmusings.com, and from the Block Party podcast network, known for the Dungeon Masters Block Podcast, the GM Showcase, Geek Wars, DM Nastics, and many other great podcasts, are Mitch Connelly and Neal Powell. Let's jump right into the discussion and what we thought of the book. Okay, everybody, now I am here with three of my favorite Dungeon Masters who are totally qualified to talk about Tales from the Yawning Portal, the latest hardcover release from Wizards of the Coast. We are super excited to talk about it, but before we get to that, let's go around the table and let us know what you do in the world of tabletop RPGs. Let us start with the one and only Sam Dillon. Sam, welcome to Tabletop Babble. It's great to have you here.
Well, thank you very much. It's great to be here. This is my first appearance on your new show.
That's right. First of many, I hope.
Yeah, I hope so. That would be cool. So just as an intro, I edit the audio for the Tome Show, and I run a little blog that I haven't written for a while called RPG Musings, and I'm very active over on RPG Geek writing reviews and hosting play-by-post games, and I run several games and been playing for many, too many years to count, too many years that I want to admit.
Well, and it's awesome to have you on, particularly for this one, and we will get to why in just a moment. But first, I want to introduce our other two folks at the table. Also here, I think for the first time on a podcast I've hosted, is the one and only Mitch Connelly from the Dungeon Masters Block podcast. Welcome, Mitch. It's great to have you here.
Hey, it's great to be here. I'm happy to be here. I do the Dungeon Masters Block, other shows for the Block Party Podcast Network, such as the GM Showcase, which you need to go and listen to if you haven't. I love that show. As well as I also host Geek Wars, which, James, I think you may be on sometime in the future, yes?
Yes. I'm excited. I boned up on season 1, listened to the whole season so that I'm ready to roll in case there's any repeat questions.
All right.
So... but knowing you, Mitch, you never do anything lazy, so I'm guessing it'll be all fresh questions.
That's true. That's true. Be afraid. Be very afraid.
Yeah, they're hard. Well, I am happy that you are here, and of course, another person from the Block Party Podcast Network, and a great bearded man, the one and only Neal Powell. Neal, welcome to Tabletop Babble.
I was really hoping you were going to do the one and only thing, because I was going to shut it down, because I'm a junior and I named my son the same. So I'm like one of 3. And it's just like so much less important sounding, but enough of that. So,
but wait, are you the only one of the 3 with a beard?
Yes.
Oh, see, that makes you special.
I just want to say that I love that no matter where Neal goes, his beard is the thing that is the first thing to be mentioned on a form of media that has no video. So I just want to state this, and you'll have to figure out if I'm telling the truth or if Neal's telling the truth. Neal has never had a beard in his life. So that's what I'm going to go on record saying.
Hey, there's show notes. James, you can post a picture on the show notes.
That's right. I'm taking a
All
screenshot.
those pictures on his Facebook account, they're all fake.
Yep.
It looks nothing like that.
I've invested so much time and energy in Photoshop. I help do the other stuff at the Block Party Podcast Network, namely DMnastics, the gym for Dungeon Masters to work out their minds. I also help with a great mutual friend of ours, James. I help Rich Howard and Caleb G with The Whelmed right now, doing some of their editing to help keep them sane and listen to all their stuff before anyone else does. I think that's my real goal there.
I know. And you also have children and a job, and you just don't sleep, I guess.
Freelance writer for the Salt and Wound setting.
That's right. Putting out some great stuff. So I'm excited to have all of you here, right? You've all got tons of experience talking about D&D, reading about D&D, and most importantly, playing D&D. We're going to talk about Tales from the Yawning Portal. For people who don't know what it is, it's a collection of 7 classic D&D Dungeon Delve adventures updated for 5th edition. From 3rd edition, there's the Sunless Citadel and the Forge of Fury. And then from 1st edition, there's the Hidden Shrine of Tomoe-chan, White Plume Mountain, Against the Giants, Tomb of Horrors, and all of those have been updated throughout various other editions of D&D. And then there is, from the D&D Next playtest, Dead in Thay. So I want to dive right in, and Sam, I want to start with you. A lot of people have complained, without seeing the product, that this is a filler product. That this is just an update that you could very easily do on your own, because I think we've talked about how easy it is to sort of update things to 5th. It's usually a very simple conversion. Basically like, hey, if it says Minotaur, just use the stats for the 5th edition Minotaur, that sort of thing. So the big question is this a quote-unquote filler product if you already own all of these adventures in one form or another, or does it do more updating beyond that? And then after we sort of answer this question, we'll dive more into the meat of what this product is and our, specific thoughts about it. But let's answer this big question first to kind of get it out of the way. Sam, what did you think? And I ask you that because I am pretty sure you do own all of these adventures in some form.
Yeah, yes, I do. I actually have mixed feelings. So let me actually address your first question, which is it filler? My answer is it depends on your point of view.
Ooh.
Because I think it's really super easy for me to say, oh, it's total filler. There are, if I was, okay, so I'm a professor. If I was to run this document through a program that looks for matching on other documents, for plagiarism, it would match something like 87% or something ridiculous like that, right? Because so much of it is just a very, very slight rewording or a direct copy from the original.
Yeah.
Now, having said that, I think that it's really easy for me to, if I want to look at that as filler, I think I could probably make that argument and make it very well. However, I've been playing for 40 years. I mean, 30 something. And
20 something.
And I've played every edition extensively. And I can easily update these numbers, especially the 1st edition modules, up to 5th edition very quickly. But I'm probably an anomaly compared to the majority of players. And in fact, all of us on this podcast are probably an anomaly because we're kind of the experts. We're the amateur experts, right? Like, we don't work for Wizards of the Coast, the producers of the product, but we're probably as close to an expert as you can get in that respect, right? And so it's kind of cheating for me to say, oh, well, it would be so easy for me to do this myself. Because maybe it wouldn't be so easy for someone who's just getting into the game but wants to know about, some of the older exercises or modules or adventures. They might not know the first thing about what to do. And it's not so much about the monsters. It's about traps and tricks and like I looked for some specific things in here, and we can talk about some specifics later. But they did do some pretty nice conversions in certain places that made the game really player and GM friendly in a way that it was not necessarily player or GM friendly in the first place. So
yeah, those Gygax adventures, like Against the Giants and Tomb of Horrors, I think they made me understand some things that I had never understood before, how they should work. So I'm certainly grateful for some of this conversion work. Like you said, particularly when it comes to complicated traps and things like that. Yeah, I probably could do that, but I don't know if I could do it on the fly. I would probably have to sit down and take some time. So how about you, Mitch? Do you have any of these adventures on your shelf or any version of them on your shelf? And do you feel like this is a filler product?
I think that your question you're asking right now is a really, really important one. And that being said, it was a question that didn't even come into my mind when I came to the Yawning Portal. And I think part of that was because I saw this and I just went, I love this idea. I think that it's fantastic. I know that this is not a new idea, like updating old classic dungeon crawls and modules to newer versions. There's nothing new about that. They've been doing that forever. But honestly, one, I'd be upset if they didn't do that. I'm happy for them to do that because we talked a little bit about it already, but personally, I do not want to go and have to make the conversions myself. And two, other people will do that. You can go online, and I think already you can find, one of the dungeon crawls is Tomb of Horrors, which I love, but that one, I believe, is already available somewhere online for 5e conversion and everything. That being said, this is Wizards of the Coast releasing it, so now which version am I going to go to? I'm going to absolutely go to this one if I want to run Tomb of Horrors for 5th edition. And so I think for me, it's really hard to just say, filler, get out of here. Because one thing that's been happening with Wizards, with these D&D books, these supplemental books, I feel like they're just spitting them out there, but they're quality books that they keep on bringing. Volos just came out, and Volos is amazing. So for me, it's even if I felt like this was filler, which personally I don't, I'm really excited about this. To me, I'd just be oh, that's okay, because I've got all this other stuff that I haven't even hardly touched from Wizards that they've put out that I could spend just hours using them. So those are my thoughts.
Yeah, no, I think that's very fair. And, it didn't occur to me when I saw it. I was like, oh, this sounds great. And then I saw, I went to the internet and the internet told me I was wrong, right?
Yeah.
The internet said, stop being excited and get furious with us. But it's been interesting to read because I do think, like Sam said, there is a lot of this text is exactly the same. So, Neal, how about you? What did you think? Did you think of this as a filler product if you already own these adventures in some form?
If you owned all of them, and I do own a majority of them, and I actually did just that. I took the Sunless Citadel and the Forge of Fury, I ran countless times because that's when I was originally getting into it and starting to run as a DM. And yeah, it was almost like you took those as a first draft, and then what showed up in the Yawning Portal was more of a cleaned up version, almost as if someone had just done an additional editing pass and done their own flavor of the editing for it. Now, in regards to it being a filler, I'll say yes, but then I'll put a caveat on that. Yes, it's perfect to fill in the spots in your adventure and campaign that weren't already filled. And I say that because it runs such a great range of levels that these could be the pieces that get you from one of the really big hardcovers to the next one if your players didn't get far enough in level. I'll also agree though that with Sam in that if you've watched these grow up, I guess would be the term. White Plume Mountain was 1st edition. I could easily find 2nd edition. I could easily find 3rd edition. If you watched that happen, watching it go to 5th isn't that exciting. And I could see how part of these would fall off as entertaining for some people, but I would be blown away if the whole book was just a throwaway. But at the same time, then okay, like Mitch had referred to, are you already done with all of the amazing things that have come out? I mean, if you're running through that much stuff, you're probably running out of material regardless.
How
of what
many
Wizards-
hours do you play?
Yeah. So I think it'll only hit a small section of people, and I think that the people that are probably most vocal are the ones that have been in the community for the longest time. And I would be pretty down if I'm like, yeah, here it is again for like the fourth time. I'm good.
That's interesting though, because like one thing that I think is really prevalent now with 5th edition that I think all of us as people involved in the RPG industry are seeing it. There's new people coming to D&D every day. And so for some of us, like, it's like, okay, how many times are they going to do this? But for some people, it's like, they're new to this. They're new to 5th edition. There are new dungeon masters who never run any of this. I haven't ran a lot of these. And it's just like, here, it's for 5th edition. Here you go. And for those of us who are like, yeah, I have played that. That was a great thing, but I'm personally not that excited. At the very least, maybe there's an aspect of this that you can go, yeah, but isn't it great that now new players can have the experience that I've had with this?
Yeah, and that's how I felt about it. I feel like if you're saying that this is filler, it's because you have the luxury of having played a lot of editions, so you understand how to convert quickly, and you already paid for your adventures. So in some respects, right, Wizards of the Coast or TSR got your money already. And if you don't want to pay twice for adventures that you have, I totally understand that. That being said, we'll talk more about it, but I think the conversions are really good. And I think that if you want to own these adventures, this is a great format to own them in. And there's a lot of good stuff that we can talk about. And there's definitely some quibbles to talk about as well. But I do think that this checks boxes for what some people were asking for. There were people asking for conversions. I think new players, it helps update certain things. And Wizards is so... when they talk about the brand, they're all about talking about their back catalog and what's come before. It helps those new players have a frame of reference for that stuff now, too. In addition to that, and people have been asking for a book of dungeons that they can easily drop into places, right? And that's what this is. All of these adventures are very dungeon delve focused. So you've got a range of levels and a range of dungeons. I mean, if you finish up Storm King's Thunder and want more giants, they got 60 pages of giants for you in this book, right? I think it's pretty cool that it checks all of those boxes.
I also think it does two other things. It shows the ability of 5th edition to really be run like an old school game, or to be run like a new school game, but with a dungeon.
Right. Right.
Okay. And it also is sort of, it's signaling to the fans, in a way, it's signaling to the fans, okay, we said 5th edition was going to be sort of modular and able to handle lots of different play styles. And we also said, 5th edition is going to be the edition. We're going to stick with it for a long time. We're going to have a slower release schedule. We're going to try to make things meaningful again. Even if we hearken back to the older sort of ideas, we're going to make those meaningful for the new modern audience. And I think those two things, just showing that it really does work with the old style module and letting that be a signal that they really are trying to be true to their word, I think that alone makes it not only a filler. So even if you're a person who thinks, yeah, this is a filler book, it's actually not. It's a very good strategy to show people, hey, we really meant what we said. And here's us putting our money where our mouth is.
Absolutely. I think you're right. It makes it feel like when comic books are going to update an old storyline or revisit a storyline, I got that feeling of it too. Like, hey, we're going to, make these stories something for new people to enjoy, which is always great. So let's talk about sort of thoughts in general on this product. I'd love to do like a deep dive into every single adventure, and we'll certainly talk about our favorites and our least favorites.
It'll be a 7-part series. Let's do it.
Right,
Let's go.
Exactly. But we do not have the time, but I do think it's safe to say that we're probably going to get into some spoiler territory. If you haven't played these adventures before, particularly Tomb of Horrors, you may want to stop listening listening if you have plans to play through them as a player. We will definitely be getting into the nitty-gritty about this and talking about each one, although not a super in-depth dive because we just don't have the time. But let's talk about product in general, your big key thoughts, and we'll get into like differences between layouts and descriptions and art and stuff like that. We've got some specific questions about that, but like the big question overall, big likes, big dislikes for this product. Sam, let's start with you.
I do like the layout. I like that they sort of updated everything, and it's maintaining the 5th edition style with, for example, monster stat blocks in the back. Okay. So it doesn't take up space on the page in the middle of the module. That's a good thing. I like that. In general, I like the way that they tried to introduce the modules and bring it into the sort of reason why it's called Tales from the Yawning Portal and that sort of thing. I generally think they made a good effort there. I'm not sure it works 100%, especially as a campaign framework, but that's a play style thing in some ways. Something I missed, I won't say I didn't like it, but something I missed, a couple of these old modules, Hidden Shrine and Tomb of Horrors specifically, had little booklets with extra art in them. Mm-hmm. And so some of the text, if you look at the original module, it'll say, show the player's image number 2, and then it'll talk about what happens. They didn't do that. They didn't keep that aspect or that element of the original module.
Sure.
And in some cases, there were some pieces of art that were really, really great props for the players that I feel like that's a missed opportunity. And in the Sunless Citadel specifically, at the beginning of the original module, they have a couple of different small inset maps that they did not include in this book. And I think they should have, because they were just like, little 8th page size drawings that could have been really good. To keep in there, especially because the Sunless Citadel is the first sort of adventure in here, and there's no map of the town or anything like that. And that was actually, there was a little inset picture in the original module. So they made some really good changes, and then they made a couple that I wish they would have not made those changes.
This is a chance for me to plug the Roll20 version of Tales of the Yawning Portal. That, full disclosure, I helped sort of input the text into the table. There are pieces of art that Roll20 converted into handouts that you can digitally hand out to your players. But unfortunately, if it wasn't in the book, so like we couldn't go back and get those old 1/8 page maps, that would have been really awesome, and put those in the table to hand out. So if it's not part of this book, it won't be part of the, Roll20 experience, but some of the art, especially the art that it helps to have as a handout, exists as a digital handout if you buy the Roll20 version.
Now, having said everything I said, I will tell you, there is nothing going through this book that struck me as, oh, I really don't like that. The things in this book, I thought, wow, that's really nice the way they did that. That conversion's really smooth, or, oh, that's a really cool piece of art that is something new, and that's really nice to see that visually. Overall, it's a more likes than dislikes for sure.
That's really, really good. And I agree. I think a lot of the conversions, particularly, I keep going back to Tomb of Horrors, but I find like reading the first edition version of that is difficult. It is a hard adventure to read and figure out. And I feel like they did a lot mechanically to make you understand. It's still a very deadly dungeon. Still super, super deadly, but a lot easier to understand. So that is a lot of fun. It made me excited to run it.
Yeah, White Plume Mountain is very similar because it's not as deadly, but it has lots of sort of, we sort of call it a funhouse dungeon, right? There's in pretty much in every room, there's kind of a new trick or a new trap or a new something. The players have to think through how they're going to have their characters deal with that particular challenge. And you can't just plop the 1E version onto your table and expect 5th edition characters to be equally challenged by some of them, or to be able to not die during some of the others. And so so I feel kind of about White Plume Mountain the same that you're feeling about Tomb of Horrors.
I agree. Mitch, what do you think? Big likes, big dislikes?
Spoiler alert here. I'm going to have a lot more big likes than I am going to dislikes. So some of my big likes were that one, and I know that a lot of these are just updated things, but one, as I was perusing this, the maps are big and they're beautiful. And that is, I mean, when we're talking about modules that are for dungeons, that's important. It's awesome. Like I said, I really like that they're bringing back popular dungeon crawls. And these are not tiny dungeons. These are like big dungeons. So as much as like I want to be like, this is great for a one-shot. This is great for a one-shot that's spent over many, many nights. Like you're not getting through this very, very quick. And that callback to the old stuff, like every single module has, like at the beginning of it, the picture of the original module, information on it. I think that's just cool. Just saying, hey, here, this is almost like a tribute to what it originally was, and having that in the book itself, I like that a lot. I'll be honest, as somebody who loves Dungeons and Dragons, I spend primarily, I'm going to say 99% of the time when I play D&D in my own homebrew world, or if I'm a player in my friends' homebrew worlds. So although I have almost all the 5th edition books, I have not played Curse of Strahd. I have not played Princes of the Apocalypse. I've used elements from those books, but I have not played through those. This is the first book that I've like seen that I've already pre-ordered that I'm just like, I need to try this. Like I need to try some of these, especially because they're classics and I haven't played all of the classic ones. And hey, if you only play in homebrew worlds, use this as a dungeon in your homebrew world, rename some things, reskin it a little bit. You have these awesome dungeons that you could have now as some of the most scary dungeons in your world. Going back to the art is amazing in it. There's this one picture that I came across in Against the Giants of hill giants just eating at a table. And it's just meat all over the table, and they're just ripping it apart. And I just like stopped and had to look at that piece of art, and I was like, oh, that's fantastic. It's got great appendix of magic items, great appendix of creatures. If you like some of the modules books, the supplemental books, I got almost exclusively to be like, I want the races in that book. I want the monsters in that book. And if that is something that you're like me, and that's all that you need to be like, yeah, I got it, sweet, add it to my collection. Like there are monsters in this book. There are magic items that you can have, that you can take and use and put in your own world. I'll end with just saying this. I too, James, I think I'm the most fixated on Tomb of Horrors because I have great memories from Tomb of Horrors. And so I looked at Tomb of Horrors, and I'm very, very excited about Tomb of Horrors to be able to have a 5th edition conversion.
Yeah, and it's super, super fun. I think if you have the right mindset for Tomb of Horrors. And we'll get into sort of the lethality of some of these older adventures in a minute. But before we do that, I want to hear from the one and only Neal Powell II.
With a beard. Hey, you want me to blow your mind with a piece of trivia on that? The only time I would become a second is if my father passed away. So so I'm a junior right now, and technically, if he were to pass away, I could take on the mantle of senior and call my son junior, which would be the weirdest thing, and I'd never do it. But now you know. So my number one is, and I looked it up. I went to the front of the book. I'm like, I know these maps. Sure enough, it's Mike Schley, and his style is just fits into the 5th edition style, and it's so beautiful. I mean, going from the Sunless Citadel and the Forge of Fury, it's not quite as far as the leap. Now going from the old school blue and white, and you're like, I don't know I can't make that out, to his style.
Yeah.
Is absolutely stunning to get some of those. I do agree that not all of the maps were brought forward, and that was really interesting on how they would have made those choices. But I also really, really loved the framing of it with Undermountain being kind of alluded to. But I'm not going to lie, that was almost a dislike for me as well. Is like, you gave me too much of a hint about Undermountain, and you gave me literally nothing about actual Undermountain. It was like, here's how you get down there, here's why people get down there, here's all this information about it. We're done now. No rooms, no nothing.
I just picture you like a cat, like swinging at that like little like toy in front of you and then it being yanked from you.
Yeah, I want so much Undermountain right now. I think another big plus for the book is that the Doom Vault from Dead and Thay is probably one of the biggest portions of the book and is probably one of the least used modules or dungeons out of the entire thing. And I think that's one of the reasons why they tried to bring it forward was like, hey, look, we did this thing, but we probably released it at the time that no one, well, okay, I'll just be mean about it, that no one really cared because fifth edition didn't really have its legs under it. It was still D&D Next, which like is not really a thing anymore, or really, it's like Windows ME. Nobody really talks about it.
It was meant to be part of organized play at the time. Like you would go to your game store and you were all working together to get through this 110 room dungeon. And it was like table 3 is over there in the Forests of Slaughter, and we're over here in the Ooze Grottos.
Yeah, it was a multi-table organized play event.
Yeah, so you're right. Nobody played this thing, and nobody played it as written in Yawning Portal. So
yeah, I was gonna say, even your example, I mean, maybe you played in, and yeah, that one is terrifying. I mean, I can segue into terrifying because one of the things that immediately stuck out to me was, oh, these are the most deadly dungeons of all time. And I was thinking back, like, I've played Sunless Citadel. For some reason, I have 2 copies of the Forge of Fury. I don't remember them being that deadly. Then I looked into this new version, and they're awful deadly. So I mean, I have something super specific about that whenever we're ready to move into how deadly things are.
Well, why don't we do that right now? Because I think players of 3rd edition, certainly of 4th edition, and even some of the published adventures that exist, some are really deadly in some places and cakewalks in other places. Sam, you and I have talked about that before. But, these older adventures, Tomb of Horrors, known as deadly, some people think it's not fun because you're basically walking, 1 inch at a time, scanning with your 10-foot pole as you go, right? Against the giants, there's a room where you walk in and there's like all these giants and ogres, and there's just no way you could survive if you take it head on. So Neal, let's get into the deadliness of it. What do you think is super deadly?
So the super deadly pieces of Sunless Citadel and Forge of Fury that I went back and forth with is dragons. So I took it's easily available for anyone that wants to look up in an SRD. The damage for the breath weapon on a young white wormling is 1d6. In 5th edition, it casts a cone of cold for 5d8 on a 1st level party.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if that dragon plays its cards right, it literally killed everyone. Like, it's a 15-foot cone. So then I go and I look up, I'm like, well, we're already down this road. I look up a young black dragon who used to do 6d4. Now they do 11d8. And the tactics for that dragon are literally, it dives in the water, pokes its head up, and shoots your party, dives away, flies around behind them, and shoots them again. Mm-hmm. Also, the recharge on the breath weapons, it goes up from about 25% to around 33%. So not only is it worse, it's happening more often. So dragons are no joke in this edition.
Well, and I think if you look at the challenge ratings for those dragons, like a level 2 party in Forge of Fury is going to get wrecked by a young black dragon statted as is. So yeah, I mean, I think that deadly nature is there, and DMs should be aware of it. Some players like a more lethal game, some don't. What did you think about the deadliness of it, Sam?
That was kind of the first thing I went to in Sunless Citadel and Forge of Fury was those sort of end round encounters with the dragons. I pulled out the 5th edition monster manual and I went, oh yeah, now I remember. These are, formidable. So having said that, if you look at something like, for example, the yellow mold, which used to be really horrible, is very light on deadliness because of the way that they converted it. The conversion work was mostly traps and sort of non-sentient items, whereas the monsters, those they just used if they already had one for 5th edition, they used the stats for that. So for dragons, they had them. And dragons are extremely deadly in 5th edition, as they should be. I mean, none of us are going to argue that they should be, like little kittens. But because of that sort of disparity, some of the things that would have been deadly in 1st or 2nd edition are no longer deadly because they were sort of adjusted up to the modern sort of style of trap finding and dealing with different challenges with certain skill checks and whatnot. Whereas, in 1st edition, you can have a save or die, literally. Okay, you failed your save. And the saves for each class were completely different. So, a fighter has a really horrible chance of saving at anything intelligence or wisdom based. Whereas that might not be true in 5th edition based on how that person did their attributes and how they built their character. So there's a little bit of disparity because the creatures are, if they're deadly in 5th edition, it doesn't matter where you meet them, they're going to be deadly. And some of these you meet at relatively low levels. Whereas the traps are less challenging, let's say, than they would have been in 1st edition. So do I think it's deadly? Absolutely. I think anything in here it can be deadly. Depending on how the GM deals with it, and depending on how the players deal with it. This Tomb of Horrors, even though it's been sort of updated and some of the traps aren't as directly deadly, you're running through a gauntlet of really dangerous stuff. And by the time you get to the 5th or 6th item that does 3d6 damage and you're out of healing, you're screwed. And so it's deadly in that way. In a sort of more of a slow burn, you're not going to make it out alive, rather than you failed your roll, you're dead automatically.
Yeah, there is before the final encounter, a very important initiative roll that if you get 10 or less than on, you die. But
yes.
Yeah, for the most
part.
Yes,
they did leave some of those in, yes, absolutely.
Yeah, but I think that's good that they updated it and it feels like more of a grind rather than you're done in 5 minutes. And I think there's a lot of that old school design mentality of you can go and interact with an object. You see this in Hidden Shrine of Tomoa-chan a lot. Go and interact with this object. It could have treasure or it could explode and be terrible for you. You have no way of determining. It's just kind of, if you want to be bold. And if you want to try to ignore everything, ignore everything. No risk, no reward mentality. Hey everybody, just wanted to take a quick break to let you know about today's sponsor for Tabletop Babble, Audible.com. Audible.com is offering a free audiobook and a free 30-day trial to listeners of Tabletop Babble. One book that I think you should check out is The Tomb of Horrors. That's right, a novelization of your favorite or least favorite dungeon, as the case may be. Check out this novelization by Keith Francis Strom, narrated by Bernard Citaro Clark. It takes place in the Greyhawk universe. Sounds really fun. I can't wait to check it out. To get your free audiobook and a free 30-day trial, go to audible.com/DSPN. That's audible.com/DSPN. Thanks to Audible for sponsoring this episode of Tabletop Babble, and let's get back to the discussion. Mitch, what do you think about the lethality of all of these? It sounds like you have fond memories of dying in the Tomb of Horrors.
Killing in the Tomb of Horrors.
Yeah, the thing that I would focus on is when I look at these dungeons, I'm looking at these and going, oh boy, these are big dungeons. These are lethal just for the sake of there's so much in them. We look at the Against the Giants, and that one is here's a giant fortress. Here's another giant fortress. Here, guess what, is another giant fortress. And like we're saying, James, you walk into a room and there's 7 giants in there. It's that's one room. That's scary as heck. I look at Dead and Thay with the Doom Vault. That one, I'm first of all, I didn't know. I knew that it was something that they were doing for play in gaming stores and everything. I didn't know that it was a multiple table thing. And that makes a lot of sense to me because when I look at the Doom Vault map, I'm this is not a map. This is an entire world. It's so big. It would take forever. And the sheer size of the dungeons by themselves, beyond just the monsters that are dropped into it, are frightening. That to me is one of the scariest parts, is just how big these dungeons are. And knowing my players, they would just keep wanting to go, let's keep going. We can handle it. And eventually they're going to hit something that, yeah. I wasn't particularly surprised when I did look. The one that I looked the most at was Tomb of Horrors, just because I'm the most familiar with it.
Oh, sure.
I wasn't surprised to find that most of the traps were less lethal. Honestly, I think I expected that a lot more, the being less lethal. I think going into this type of supplemental material, because I feel like that's what's been presented so far in 5th edition, with maybe Curse of Strahd being an exception to that, is I feel like 5th edition has pushed more the story element, the narrative, than the classic style of, like, we're running you through dangerous dungeons and you all might die. Like, I feel like that's not been the big push for 5th edition so far. And I was pleasantly surprised to see when I know there might be some argument, but I think I was going into it thinking these are not going to be scary at all. So I was pleasantly surprised to see, all right, you're saying these are scary dungeons. Okay, I can get on board with you. These are scary dungeons.
Yeah, they definitely are scary, and they are big, like we talked about. When you mentioned Dead and Thay, it made me think about, like, Dead and Thay, you could turn into 10 different dungeons if you wanted to.
There's that many different sections.
Split it up.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, we should also make the point that even though it was a multi-table event in organized play when it was released, the update takes that out and frames it so that you can use it with one group. You don't have to recruit 5 more parties of players to run through, although that might be interesting.
Would be cool. Yeah. Or a nightmare, depending.
Yeah, or probably both. Yeah. Exactly. But you could also just chunk it out and take the forest area and put it in your world somewhere else, or take the area with the pigs and all that and put it somewhere else. I mean, it's really modular in that way, which is it's really kind of interesting the way that they did that one.
Sam, after you said that, I had this image of, like, you see those master chess players going around from table to table and playing chess with like 7 people.
Yeah.
The master dungeon master going through 7 tables and being like, all right, you go in that room. Here, let me roll for the monster. Go to the next table.
Clicking your timer as you go.
Well, that's the best part too, is because also having something and knocking over a player's mini, hitting the timer and walking over to the next one.
Yes.
Perfect. But the best thing in Dead and Thay is definitely the super evil D4 at the end.
No kidding.
Because it's D4. It's like a D4 with D4s on it, and each side has its own gravity, and you can, like, shoot around. It was the craziest thing. I read that section probably like 3 times before I even sort of understood it, and I was like, I don't know if I'll ever run this. I'm gonna mess it up.
Try having to put that map into Roll20 and make sense of it. We pretty much just put it down as is, and we were like, we're just not going to draw any barriers here, just so people can move from that. That was the solution. So, but it's, there's a lot of great stuff. And, Sam, I think it's good you mentioned the update to Dead and Thay that they made. And then you also mentioned that a lot of the language has not changed.
But I did notice something, even right from the beginning in Sunless Citadel. So in Sunless Citadel, there's one part in the beginning when you go to town, and one of the hooks is that there's these 3 adventurers or something that are missing or something like that. And you can actually go, like, to the little tavern and... it says it's this interesting wording change that they made. It says that the tavern keep will tell you that about 13 or 15 years ago, a grim human named Belak stopped by and had a large pet frog. In the original text, it says a grim man. It doesn't say grim human. So it struck me as something very, very interesting in terms of, technically that is a gender neutral name. And if you wanted to make that a human female, you could do so.
Yeah.
Because of that one word change.
Which is interesting. And in Hidden Shrine of Tomoe-chan, there used to be a sexy monster that male characters just couldn't attack which, you know, I think was rightfully removed in this update, and probably some other updates of the game throughout its editions. So, you know, I think you do see some of that, and there's some parts where, like for instance, the Giant Kings, they have their wives, and their wives are often referred to as, like, this is his lady, you know? So I think there's some sort of patriarchal language in there, and certainly I think maybe there's some things that, like Hidden Shrine of Tomoe-chan, you know, there's a lot of sort of Mesoamerica giant ziggurat sort of thing, but I do appreciate a lot of the updating that they did, and the art continues to have, you know, interesting, diverse characters, people of color and women adventuring in there, which I think is great. It's great to see Wizards has sort of tackled that and paid attention. Like you said, Sam, that's a really subtle difference, but could make a big difference if you're first time running that adventure, right?
The interesting thing, and I do agree, I find it interesting that they use the Hidden Shrine because of how poorly the Maztica setting went, so much so that it was taken over and just like, hey, it disappeared. Something else is in its place now. Like, hand wavy. We know we didn't do a good job. I'm sorry.
Yeah, but see, that doesn't make me think twice, because this wasn't made for Forgotten Realms originally. It was in Greyhawk, so it really didn't have anything to do with Maztica.
Yeah, from the original module, though, even if however much that may or may not offend someone, I found it really interesting that the verbiage they used in the original one was that the design is drawn heavily on Mayan and Aztec mythology.
Yes.
And there was also a disclaimer: DMs wishing to expand on these ruins will find it very helpful to use their local library to find out more about these fascinating cultures.
Yes.
I was like, that's such a great start. Not a great follow through back in the day, but it's like seeing these newer versions. But I was so blown away with how negative, you know, and I rightfully so. There's a very negative perspective on a lot of these things from older times, but it's like you guys like feel like you had the right mentality. It's just, I don't know, not enough follow through back then. Oh well.
Right. Well, and it felt like sometimes Gary Gygax did things just because he knew they would annoy people, and not just in terms of offensive stuff. It just seems to be how he lived his life. Tomb of Horrors is, I think, the prime example of that. So, Mitch, you mentioned the art. I'd love to just go around the table real quick. What did you guys think of the art, Mitch?
I love it. I've loved everything that 5th edition has put out with art. So I mentioned the giants, the hill giants sitting around the table. Everything, I love giants, and so everything from that Against the Giants adventure with just pictures of the fire giant on its throne, the frost giant sitting back with all these heads of its trophies on the wall, like it was awesome for me. I was like, oh, I'm just getting sucked in. Like, that's the first thing I go to when I get a new D&D book, is I just flip through it and look for the art. I'm like, I'll read later, but I'm going to look at this beautiful art right now. One thing that I really liked, and this is such a small thing, but at the back of the book with the creature appendix, it brought forth the choker, which is like a classic D&D monster. But it looked like it has a picture of the choker, and it has like 2 chokers there. One of which is like the classic old looking choker. The other one is like, it's a primate looking choker. It's a really interesting take. And I'm like, ooh, like, I just like that idea of like, and that makes me as a dungeon master who likes to make homebrew worlds and things. I'm like, ooh, that, like, I want to take monsters and I want to give them a different like look when they come into a different region or whatever it is. I really found that interesting. So yeah, I was inspired by the art, to say the least. That's really, really cool.
Yeah, I was a big fan of the art too. How about you, Neal?
So I really liked all the stuff that was added in for the adventures themselves. And I actually heard, I believe it was Mike Merle's when he was on Dragon Talk, where essentially they're like, hey, we know what people think is cool from these modules. We get to order art pieces specifically tailored to the thing that already exists in the culture of D&D. Like, everyone remembers Meepo from the Sun, the Citadel. Well, let's go get a picture of Meepo. That being said, going back to the creature area, some of those are very old, and I find that very interesting.
I noticed
the
that.
one that stuck out was the sea lion. I'm like,
Yep.
I remember that from a very long time ago. Someone copy pasted this. So yeah, all the stuff in the modules was just perfect because they could tailor it to exactly what they knew would fit with what people already liked. It's just some of the other pieces were less time I put into it, which, hey, that's fine. I mean, it's a perfect representation of a sea lion.
No, it's true. And I wonder sometimes if they get to lay out and they're like, crap, we need something here. What do we got? Old sea lion? Plug it in, you know. Sam, what did you think about the art?
So I split art into two sections, maps and then art. So cartography and actual like character art and room art, or whatever you want to say that. I really liked it. I think the maps that they did were exemplary. I'm also a fan of Mike Schley, and so I really enjoyed those maps. For the most part, the art is really good. I actually wish there was more of it. It's good enough that I want more. But I understand the economics of page count and all that kind of stuff. But I really would have enjoyed more dispersed throughout the book.
Particularly in Dead and Thay, it feels like you get a bunch of character portraits and maps, and you don't get to see like any scenes, you know? There is one thing that is missing for me that I guess we have enough pieces of art of this thing, so I understand why nobody cares. The devil's face trap within Tomb of Horrors, where the, again, spoiler alert, the Sphere of Annihilation is in the mouth.
On the map, they use as the directional, the compass rose. It's the devil face.
Mm-hmm.
But you don't want to show your players that map.
Yeah, yeah,
they
exactly.
might know where north is if you do that.
Yes, but I do agree with that. There are some iconic pieces that feel like they're missing. So that's a part of why I say I wish there was more.
Yeah,
because what's there I really like, because they've updated certain pieces that are styled after the sort of drawings and different line art that was in the originals from 1979, and they look really beautiful in full color and in using modern art techniques, and yet there's not enough of it. So
I agree, and it is cool to see the updated pieces of art, and also scenes that it was like, oh, people thought this was a really cool scene, and I haven't seen art for it before. You know, that was also neat to see what they chose to make art for that didn't exist. Okay, so real quick, final question before we get to the would you recommend people buy or not. So what is your favorite adventure from Tales of the Yawning Portal, and what is your least favorite? And Sam, why don't we start with you?
For a one-shot, I would probably go White Plume Mountain. Each of these has a certain place, and it became a kind of iconic module or iconic adventure for a reason, and for a different reason.
Right.
So, but if I wanted to start a campaign with something, or if I had something in the middle of a campaign and I wanted to sort of go in a different direction, I might go with the Hidden Shrine. Mm-hmm. If I was starting a campaign from the beginning, I might go with Sunless. I mean, I can't pick a favorite one. I'm sorry, I can't.
That's okay.
But if you make me, I'll say Against the Giants overall is probably my favorite.
It's a good adventure. I will say this, just because I have done this for Roll20. If you try to, in some of the rooms, actually put down a creature that occupies, its combat space, you cannot do it in some of these rooms, which is pretty hilarious. So, Theater of the Mind is good, especially when you've got 50 orcs in a room. You don't want to have to keep track of all them. Those minis, just Theater of the Mind it anyway. But yeah, I love Against the Giants too. That's one of my favorites, and ties in nicely to Storm King's Thunder with its giant-y themes. How about you, Mitch? Favorite and least favorite adventures?
This is a difficult question because, as I revealed before, 99% of my time is spent in homebrew worlds. So the one module that I'm familiar with, to the extent that I've played with it, is Tomb of Horrors. So if I had to say a favorite, just because of sheer memories, that would be my favorite. And I'll admit, when I looked at the table of contents, I didn't see Tomb of Horrors. I was like, oh, I was hoping it would make it into this book. So I had this like momentary like, oh man, and then I saw it and I was like, oh, I did. Oh yay! And I got super excited. So just for excitement of like, it's a 5th edition version. I'm excited for that. As far as least favorite, I can't give you one. Part of what I'm excited, like I said, I've already pre-ordered this. Part of what I'm excited for is the fact that, I mean, I haven't been that exposed to these other modules. So for me, I won't have a least favorite until the day, which will be far off, that I get to say I've played through all of them. Not enough information yet for me to judge that. So, but I'm excited to try everyone.
That is totally cool. Mitch, do you recommend this product?
I do. I bought it. I mean, here's the thing, like if you are more like Neal and Sam and you have a lot of these and you've played a lot of these, maybe borrow it first and see what it is. Because if you kind of feel like it may be a filler, check it out from a friend first or however you can. If you're like me, that you're just excited to see these old modules being made new, it was very exciting to me. If you don't like dungeons, this is not for you either. So
yeah, very good point. Very good point. How about you, Sam? Do you recommend this product?
I sort of have a similar answer. If you already have all of these modules or access to all these modules and you've run them or played in them a million times, you probably don't need this book. And unfortunately, they did not do a good job with giving you advice on how to make it a framed full campaign using these 7 modules. I feel like if they had done that, I would recommend it to people even that had the modules already. But because they didn't do a good job with that, that's sort of, I guess that's my big dislike. You know, earlier I said I didn't really have a lot of big dislikes, and I don't, except for that one, that I think that was a lost opportunity. They could have spent 2 more pages or 3 more pages giving a really great outline of a campaign and giving some nice hooks and some nice ways to make links between each one. Because quite frankly, it's going to be really hard to link Dead and Thay to any of these other ones. Just because of the backstory, how rich the backstory is in that particular setup. So
so dependent on the realms, kind of.
Yeah, so dependent on location. It's the one that's dependent the most on location if you don't break it up. If you try to run it as is, it's really dependent on location. Or at least on all of the characters being in whatever location you put it in. So that's the thing they didn't do a good job in. So if you were going to buy it because you thought they might do that, don't buy it because they didn't do that. Yeah. But if you want the 5th edition update of these and you think it might be worthwhile, I think it's worthwhile. I'm glad I bought it. So yes, I recommend it for a certain audience. I don't think it's has as broad appeal as maybe some of the other adventures might.
I think that makes sense. If you were angry about this adventure being filler, you will probably open up and think, this is filler. But maybe you just want to be angry, and that's fine. Neal, what was your favorite adventure and least favorite?
I think for me, my favorite is the Sunless Citadel Forge of Fury combination, because that's just how you ran at the start of 3rd edition. So I really like that combination because it takes all the guesswork out of the conversion. Because I agree, we could do the conversion. The 4 of us could do the conversion easily enough. But you know how much easier it is to buy this book and not do the conversion? For me, really easy. So that's one of the draws, is that the work is done. Not that I could do the work. I mean, but I think that goes back more into a time versus money equation for myself personally. So it could be a thing that's what draws someone to the book. The one that I don't want to say that I disliked one of them, but I know the one that disappointed me the most was White Plume Mountain, because it essentially said, just go check out sentient weapons in the Dungeon Master's Guide. And that made me sad. I got really bummed out by that.
I was sad about a little thing too. They didn't give stats for Meepo. I wanted them to give stats for Meepo.
Oh,
I know. He should be more than just a kobold, right? Neal, do you recommend this?
it's one of those things where I think we're all agreeing that it's not carte blanche. It's not like, yes, everyone go buy this now. It is kind of weigh your options. There are so many people that are new to D&D, and if you are, you have to buy this because these are the modules that you hear about over and over from people that have played 10, 20, 30, 40 years. Like, this is your easiest in for figuring out what these people you're talking about and getting you and your players to experience that. Also, if you just want to run them in 5th edition and you don't have time, it's great, which I 100% plan on doing. And I honestly think that I'll focus most on Dead and Thay because it's something that I haven't experienced and figuring out either what pieces I can pull out of it or if I'll just throw the whole thing at my players. So I think it's definitely can be worth it for a lot of people, but there is definitely a section of the D&D community where it's not going to be worth it.
Well, there you have it. I think this is a recommendation from us, obviously, with a little asterisk, depending on how many of these adventures you own, how much time you're willing to put into conversions and that sort of thing, and how much you love Dungeon Delves. I think that was a good point, Mitch. If you don't like Dungeon Delves, this is not the book for you. So, before we go, thank you all for joining me. Where can people find you on the internet, Sam?
You can find me on Twitter at DMSamuel, no spaces, or at rpgmusings.com, or if you listen to the Tome Show, I'm on there quite often.
Excellent. And where can people find you, Mitch?
You can go to blockpartypodcastnetwork.com, and you can see all the shows that I am affiliated with on there, like Dungeon Masters Block, GM Showcase, and Geek Wars. And you can follow me on Twitter at DM_Mitch.
Follow Mitch, get lots of updates about Pokemon and great movies that Mitch is watching and some awesome D&D advice. And, of course, Neal Powell. Where can people find you?
At that same website, because we're on the same podcast network. But if you wanted to follow me personally, it would be at JoteManiac, which I've realized that like most people don't understand what I say when I say that. So it's like Jack of all trades, master of none, IAC, JoteManiac. There you go. Now you know how I made my Twitter handle. I think I've been Joe Pontiac before, Joke Maniac.
Yep.
So just look around on the internet. You might find me. Beard, no beard.
Joe Pontiac. Did you mean Jote Maniac?
Well, I'll tell you what, to make it easy on the listeners, we'll link it up over in the show notes at don'tsplitthepodcastnetwork.com because we love short URLs. Well, thank you all so much for joining me on Tabletop Babble today. Can't wait to have you guys back.
Thank you,
Thanks,
James.
That was an awesome review. Thank you so much to all of those dudes for coming on and talking about Tales from the Yawning Portal with me. One other thing we forgot to mention in our review is the price. The book itself is the traditional 5th edition hardcover price, which is, a few cents shy of $50. However, I'm sure it is probably cheaper if you go buy it on Amazon, but I want to take a moment to encourage you, if you can afford it, to go to a local friendly game store and pick it up. The few dollars extra help support that local friendly game store, and it will help new players get into the hobby and give people a place to play and continue to support the hobby. So if you can do that, go do that. If not, and you're still interested in this product and you can't afford the Amazon price, that's great. Go ahead and buy it on Amazon. So I just wanted to give people a heads up on the price because that seems like a thing you should do in a review. And I wanted to let you know that if you want to support Tabletop Babble, a great way to do that is go on to iTunes or Stitcher or whatever your podcatching platform of choice is and leave us a 5-star review. If you can't leave a 5-star review on your podcatching platform of choice, make an iTunes account and go leave us a 5-star review. That way it'll support support the show, and you will never need to use your iTunes account again unless you want to use it to support other podcasts that you love. I will read one new 5-star review verbatim every episode and credit the person who left it. So when you do that, you get to make me say literally anything you want to make me say. So that has been really fun. People have been coming up with some fun stuff. Let's see. Today's review comes from Abscom, and it is entitled Doing It Right. Abscom says, James assembles some seriously awesome guests to dive into the guts of gaming and rip out its entrails to help us all better understand the present state of gaming and occasionally foretell the future of the hobby. The swath that is hewn out of the brain power of the leading creators in gaming is a major gift to everyone that loves tabletop gaming. Well, thank you so much for this review, Abscom. Really, really appreciate it. Some fun, flowery language in there. Makes it super fun to read. That was all one take, people. That's how we do it over here at Tabletop Babble. You know, maybe you want to support the show financially, and there is a way to do that. That is by going to don'tsplitthepodcastnetwork.com, clicking on the banners on the left for DriveThruRPG and Amazon before you shop. If you do that, it'll cost you nothing extra, but while you shop, a few pennies on the dollar of your purchases will go to help support the show. Great way to do it while you're buying socks and underwear. I also want to encourage other people to check out some of the other podcasts on Don't Split the Podcast Network. I'm a big fan of Game O'Clock. If you like video games, you should check this one out. Every month, Rudy Basso, his brother Alex, and a guest will dive deep into a single video game genre, very specific genres, and break down the history, talk about their favorite and least favorite games, and the future of the genre. I was just on there last month, and we did a whole thing about LucasArts adventure games. Really, really fun. Check out that podcast. Tabletop Babble is a podcast on the Don't Split the Podcast Network. Thanks to Rudy Basso for founding it with me. Our theme music, which you're listening to right now, was provided by Battle Bards. Remember that RPGs are like sex. As long as everybody's having fun, you're doing it right.